Alright, draft science video, I guess. That's what I decided to do. Anyway, I could have done numerous other things, but that's the subject that I chose. Yeah, it's not. This isn't much of an official video, just a commentary on a couple of different conversations. So Holiday's talking to Piro about fields, and the first thing just screams in Piro's response is, he's just such a hypocrite, when he talks about intuition science. And that's all he has, is intuition science. It's this vague generality thing, like, well, we see ocean waves, and then we see something that looks vaguely familiar, and we just say it's the same thing, and try to force it to do the same thing, and, it's just completely, every conversation, as it seems or it looks like, are, it has the properties of, or something like that. So yeah, just no obligation to go much deeper than that, in terms of taking the simplest properties of something and saying that's all you need is these simple properties. And it's like the bent space argument I keep making, is that yeah, it all makes sense, when you're doing the curve thing in 2 dimensions. Yeah, you can play the little game because you have the asset of gravity helping. But as soon as you 3-dimensionalize it, it just turns into this perpetual motion machine. The field somehow generates the movement, and that kind of model can't be used for photons or magnetism or all the other stuff they, attempt to use it for. So there's 2 concepts here. There's the concept where you have an event inside of something, but you can't give away anything. So you bump into the field, and the field sends a message to something else, and then it bumps something almost like another dimension. Like the field is almost a separate dimension between 2 events. And this way we can communicate without having to use any real energy. And then there's field in the sense of something actually, the thing is an actual participant in, which means that everything is part of the field. Like there are no real things. Like photons aren't real things, they're just lumps in the field. And so you can warp and bend the field to warp and bend the photon's path, because the photon is not a real thing, it's just made out of a kind of field warp. So field in this kind of condition is a photon not doing anything interesting, and then field in some other configuration is photons doing something interesting, some kind of crap like that. So there are 2 different kinds of, they're using it for 2 different purposes, which is again more evidence of how this is crap. So it really, just really put me over the edge. Holiday left a link to one of these quantum field theory people, and it's just amazing. They got 16 fields is what they're really looking for. Every particle known has its own field. And, nothing's a real thing. Everything's just denting in some way, in a specific way, this field. And all the fields have different rules about how things are bent or dent, and what's possible, in that field. What the attributes are, what special, special, what do you call those, add-ons or extras it has. The power windows and whatnot. Just imagination, just with no bounds, no reason applied at all. And I'm sure, they say they have some math, I bet you they don't, because there's no way you can do this to all of these particles, because some of them are stuck where they are. They don't fly across the universe and zoom around in a field. They have to communicate with something else. So you have to now make these fields interact with each other. So then somehow the electron field has to interact, with the photon field, and then the photon field and the proton field are all folded into each other somehow, because there's real interactions between those things. And if they're not going to be things anymore, then you somehow have to make the field, interact. And yeah, I just don't buy they have that math. The good news is they were looking for some sort of crap with the super collider thingy, and they didn't find their little crap to verify their crap, so their crap is looking lamer. But they talk like it's, oh yeah, we're just so sure. So I guess that's, I guess what I really wanted to get to was just that this idea, okay, I'll give the example of the two-slit experiment. Because they're saying they're not committing to anything specific, but the idea is they'll concede the photon as a something that something gives up. Something loses energy to give up a photon. So right there you have a tricky concept, because it seems like that's more than just sending a message. Like when they make the virtual photons for magnetism, those virtual photons aren't real in any sense. In any sense that they have to lose some energy to make them. And then on the other side, I guess it's the way they think about what electrons are doing, and so they give all the attributes, ironically in that case, to the electron, and they don't pay any attention to the forces that are moving the electrons, so they can add one without it meaning anything, because they just give it to the electron as part of its velocity. So any field strength you add to a stream of electricity, the only thing they count are the electrons and how fast they're going by their definition of speed, and they decide that's what's really happening, when what's really happening is there's a bunch of stuff between the electrons that those virtual photons are becoming part of. But the point is there's no origin for the photon. The magnet doesn't give up any energy. It doesn't give up any mass to create the photon, the virtual photon. So that's why it's called virtual. So that's a case where there's no origin. There's just some sort of field perturbation that ends up going somewhere and making something happen. And in that process, it's complex enough where, yeah, we can fudge the conservation rules, and we can have the photon have a complete action and just disappear. We don't have to account for it any further because it did its action, and that's all we care about. Kind of a thing. All right. The extra power won't be realized till further downstream, so I guess it's far enough downstream where they can pretend they didn't put the poop in the water. Somebody else did it. All right. And then, like I said, then you have the other examples of like the two-slit experiment, where they say it's they're giving this thing all kinds of attributes. So first, it's supposed to be some sort of wave or energy bump in some sort of field, and this field is it's like gravity. Okay, so gravity, they give it all to mass, so mass bends the field, but there's nothing else that's supposed to be bending it. There's nothing else that's supposed to be distorting it. And then in the case of photons, though, apparently out of all the things in the universe to mess with this field, the thing that really just the field can't deal with at all is the idea of having a little aperture, a slit or two. It just completely falls apart, and all of a sudden all kinds of crazy things happen to the poor little field, and the photon does all kinds of weird and crazy things in the field that it's traveling in. Again, it's just, and again, it was a real thing to start with. Matter had to create that photon, and at the other end, it really affects something where it lands. It increases the mass of the thing it hits. It's a real thing, and yet when they want it not to be, it isn't. When they want it to be, it is. It's just this, it's so loosely and poorly constructed. No description, no known description necessary. Again, it's kind of like the Einstein cheat. You can just do away with having to figure out anything because you just make this simple principle that we know, well, we know what the thing that's causing it is that there's something to do with this having atoms and something to do with something else having atoms being in relation to each other, and they just reduce that whole relationship into nothing but a change at an amount of displacement of field volume. And then, but that's where it begins and ends. And as I've argued, the worst one of these fields is the Einstein bent space, because it takes all of the stuff that's really acting in the universe and all kinds of other places, like with magnetism and electricity. These things are using gravity. That's the force, and they'll never account for it as long as they think they can separate gravity as a function from the function of magnets and electricity and the strong and weak forces, for that matter. So anyway, I guess the bottom line is it's just, if you just scratch at these stuff a little bit, you can see that this wave thing just doesn't make any sense. That, fields that spread but don't spread, it's completely incoherent. And again, it has this, it breaks really fundamental physical laws of conservation. The whole idea that you're going to create these virtual things that are going to act just like real things. It's just such a cheat. So yeah, I guess that's it. Just a brief commentary on fields. I don't know where I'll categorize this. I'll just throw it out there as a commentary. Like I said, the worst part of it is Piro's complete duplicity and hypocrisy to accuse anyone else of doing this, superficial, intuitional science, when that's all he's doing. No details, just this vague, well, it could be this, it could be that, it could be this, it could be. I mean, no commitment to any kind of, no obligation to defend anything. Could be Donald Duck, could be Bugs Bunny, could be SpongeBob, who cares, whatever, la 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 la. Just so vague, so incomplete. You can't argue with it. It's a God theory, for fuck's sake. Sorry, but that's what it is. So ambiguous, so uncommitted, that, you can't attack it. It's too much of a piece of nothing. Alright. Yeah, I thought there was a little bit more, but I'm tired, and I just wanted to say something on the subject, but just move on to whatever my next subject is. So anyway, I have to get some, there's not too many people on the message board. It's a problem, and I got to generate some kind of rational counter arguments, some kind of argument coming back that's something other than people telling me how much their feet smell. Anyway, until next time, such.